And at that time, where was it located in your back?
In the low back, more on the right.
Then or since then, has it ever left the back to go to any other part of your body?
No.
Have you ever had pain in your back like this before?
Yes, I have.
When was that?
There's a human traffic jam in the doctor's office today. In hospitals and clinics like this one, it's even worse. More patients wanting more medical services, and a growing shortage of doctors to provide them. This means less time to spend with each patient and more to do. One of the most time-consuming parts of any doctor's day is the traditional opening dialogue between himself and the patient. The medical history, a routine that can last an hour or longer with each patient. For the busy general practitioner with a heavy schedule, doing a good job at this stage becomes almost impossible. The results all too often are sketchy histories, non-standardized and frequently illegible. Yet this is the record doctors, nurses, interns, and technicians rely on for vital information on their patients. The medical chart. Hallowed in theory, often disappointing in practice. Mistakes here can lead to serious trouble later on. Faulty diagnosis, incorrect treatment, possibly death. I'm David Prowett, science editor for National Educational Television. We're at the University of Wisconsin Medical Center, where researchers have developed an exciting new weapon to attack this problem. And here it is, Linc, the laboratory instrument computer. It has everything a physician needs to get a complete, accurate medical history from a patient, even a sense of humor. Director of this Linc project is a medical doctor and self-taught computer expert, Dr. Warner V. Slack, assistant professor of medicine and computer sciences here at the Wisconsin Medical School. Warner, you seem pretty comfortable talking to a machine. How does the average patient take to it?
Well, it's really no problem. Actually, the Linc is quite sociable as computers go. What it does really is to present a sequence of questions here on the screen to a patient, much like a physician interviewer would do. And sometimes actually teaches the patient how to proceed with the interview.
I noticed there are 4 responses on the screen. Are those standardized?
Well, there are several responses available to the patient, but usually they are yes, no, don't know, and don't understand. Here's a typical example. Have you ever been bothered by chest pain? The patient would respond by pressing key number 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for don't know, and 4 for don't understand. For example, if his answer to this question were no, he'd press key 2 and then the go bar, and the computer would then skip the subject of chest pain and proceed to another general question, in this case dealing with shortness of breath.
But what if he pressed the yes button?
Well, let's back up. We return to the question about chest pain, and if his answer is yes to this, then the computer branches out and presents to the patient a series of qualifying questions designed to elicit detail about that abnormality. For example, here, if his pain were on the left side, he'd press button number 1. If his pain were moderate in nature, he'd press button number 2. And here's a question regarding an association between the pain and exercise.
So when the computer spots a symptom, it's programmed to zero in on that symptom and find out as much about it as it can.
Exactly.
Well, I would imagine as those questions become more complex and more difficult for the layperson to understand, that the don't know or the can't understand responses come up more frequently.
Yes, this is why we put them into the interview. For example, here, well, let's return to the original chest pain question. Now, if the patient didn't know the answer and indicated this by pressing button number 3, the computer would rephrase the question. If the patient indicated that he didn't understand the question, the computer would present to him a series of explanatory sequences, sometimes actually teaching him the meaning of the concept, and then returning him to the original question for his answer.
So, like the human interviewer, the machine is geared to go along at the subject's rate of speed and taking into account the amount of knowledge that the subject has.
Exactly.
Well, what about an example?
Okay, Dave. Here's an example. Are you a heavy smoker?
I'm afraid to say I am.
Well, press button number 1 then for yes, and then the go bar.
I'm sorry to hear that. Why not cut down? I think you must have hired my wife as a programmer.
Well, actually, we have put appropriate conversational sequences into our program, sometimes actual humorous statements to encourage the progress of the patient.
You mean Linc tells jokes too?
Well, pleasantries. pleasantries. Actually, we found that this relaxes the patient and humanizes the interview.
Takes a little bit of the machine concept away from it.
Yes, yes.
Well, basically, Linc seems to be geared, or what you tried to do with it, it seems to have it do everything that the human interviewer can do and better.
Well, certainly the Linc is inexorable as an asker of questions. It's very reliable, it's consistent, and it's tireless. But the real expert with regard to the medical history is the patient himself. Certainly the quality of the information we obtain is limited by the patient's responses. So what we've done here is to connect that expert, the patient, directly with the computer.
Taking away any intervening steps.
Yes, such steps as punch cards and checklists, which are wrought with clerical error, are bypassed really with this technique.
All right, the patient has come in, Linc has asked its question, and to the best of his ability, the patient has answered. What happens to the information now?
Well, each time the patient makes a response, this goes immediately into the memory of the computer, and from there it's stored on magnetic tape. This tape right here is a storage tape, and it can hold approximately 100 patient files. Each patient record on this tape is coded with the patient's identification such that we can, at a future date, retrieve that information for patient care and clinical research purposes.
Well, I don't know about your Madison doctors, but my doctor does not have a digital readout in his office. How's he going to get the information?
Well, what we've done there is to program the computer to generate a printed summary for the physician's use when authorized, and we use a standard teletype machine here to do that. By the way, Dave, a point is that a number of patients have indicated that with regard to questions of a personal or private nature, they actually find it easier to communicate to the machine.
It avoids the embarrassment of having to tell something personal to another person?
Yes, it seems that, well, patients want the physicians to know this information, but the telling is difficult, and it seems easier to tell the machine. A number of people have told us this.
Well, now that's the end of step one. Now, what happens now?
Well, traditionally, the clinical process is divided into 3 stages. And we've been talking about the medical history, where the physician or the computer interviews the patient. The second stage is the physical examination, where the physician examines the patient. And the third stage is the laboratory examination. We've programmed the computer to interview the physician regarding its physical examination findings.
Well, if Linc is ready and you're ready, why don't we get started with my exam?
Well, when was your last checkup?
I'm ashamed to tell you.
Well, tell it to the Linc.
It's talking to me already.
Right.
Hello there, I'm now going to show you how to operate this computer. First, find the go bar and press it. All right?
Very good.
Right. I will always show you what 1, 2, 3, and 4 mean beneath each question. Is this clear? Couldn't be clearer. So that's yes, and I press number 1.
Right.
Well, that's number 1. And yes, that's number 1, too.
With a physical examination, the physician is interviewed directly regarding his findings, and his responses go into the computer much as with a medical history. Here, for example, it's asking me about your cranial nerves, whether or not they were normal, which they were on examination. So I press button number 1 to indicate that, and the computer branches out to another question, this time regarding your reflexes, which I will test now. The physical examination program is still in the testing stages, but we hope to have it become routine sometime in the near future.
Well, it takes you through all the steps and doesn't let you forget any, does it?
No, it's very persistent, actually. Now, I'll record normal findings for your reflexes. And here it's asking me about comments on the general physical examination. By the way, the Linc isn't the only computer that could do interviewing such as this. Any computer with a display device and a keyboard or a light pen for input would be well suited for such research if it were adapted for this purpose. We decided upon Linc because of its availability here at Wisconsin and because of its low cost. A colleague of mine, Dr. Joseph Hind, introduced the Linc to the University of Wisconsin Medical School because he thought it was well suited for our program here.
And it certainly has been,
hasn't it? Yes, it certainly has been. Well, Dave, I guess it's time for the laboratory.
That's step 3.
Right, that's step 3. And unfortunately, there's one thing we haven't computerized yet.
Don't tell me.
Right, the needle.
I wish you'd do some work on that.
Well, I think we ought to. Dr. Merle Evenson is in the lab right now. He's in charge of our autoanalyzer for blood tests. It's quite a remarkable piece of machinery.
This is serum, the fluid part of blood that's left when the cells have been centrifuged to the bottom. A pump sucks the sample out of the cup into this tubing, where it is split into 12 different sections. As each section is passed on, different chemicals are mixed with it, and various analytical processes are carried out. The results of all this automated activity is a definitive message on each test fed directly to the computer, digested into the memory and available as a typewritten record on printouts for the attending physician. The autoanalyzer handles complete sequential blood tests for 30 patients every hour. As a matter of fact, the speed of this machine is a major factor in needing a laboratory computer just to process the huge volume of data we generate. Manual testing by technicians couldn't possibly match the quality or quantity of automation. With the computer recording the results, our people are free to work on more complex tests. And even here, the computer is proving to be of great assistance. Dr. Philip Hicks pioneered our work here in these applications.
There are 3 classes of work connected with using the computer in the laboratory. The first is the direct collection of information from automated instruments. The blood autoanalyzer is an example of that. There are other automated lab machines in the fields of chemistry and hematology, hematology being the study of blood cells. A second category is the use of the computer directly by laboratory personnel to perform what used to be manual operations, like having Linc assisting in the calculation of various serum proteins in a blood sample. This is what the medical technologist is doing here now. In certain tests, the computer will calculate and print results in minutes. Manually, it could take a couple of hours. A third computer area is quality control analysis. The results of some 2,000 or more laboratory tests are fed into Linc each day by the laboratory staff and the automated instruments. Then we ask Linc to perform statistical analysis of this data. This kind of information helps us to establish such things as what is the normal range for each kind of laboratory test. If a doctor asks, is this blood sugar level too high? We have to look at all of the blood sugar tests we've run to give him an answer. In hematology, this kind of analysis also helps us to tell whether or not the testing machinery is functioning properly from day to day, or whether we have troubles in the laboratory. That's why we call this quality control. Linc also gives us our census reports, how many tests we perform each month in each category. So literally, Linc is in the business of generating all kinds of numbers used in the practice of medicine with a maximum of quality and a minimum of time. I believe the Prowett tests are coming through now. These results will be on your teleprinter as well, Dr. Slack.
Cholesterol normal. Calcium, phosphorus, total bilirubin, normal. Proteins, normal. DUN, glucose. LDH, all normal. Glutamic oxaloacetic transaminase, normal. Very
Well,
good.
I guess I should be happy about that, but I'm not sure what it is.
Well, actually, that's a liver function study, David.
What kind of a picture does this give you of my blood now? Pretty complete?
Yes, it's a comprehensive health screening test, yes.
And how did I come out?
Very well, very well. Actually, I've been looking at your record, and it's normal except for one thing. I must agree with Linc on one point here.
What's that?
You smoke too much.
Agreed. No arguments at all. We've been talking about Linc in pretty much in terms of organic medicine. Where there's an actual disease, you can kind of put a handle on it and you know what you're speaking of. But what about psychosomatic disorders, where questions are more difficult, the answers are certainly more qualified? Is Linc, can it handle it now? Will it handle it in the future?
Well, we've been giving a lot of thought to this problem. And actually, we're working on a psychiatric interview, a computer-based psychiatric interview. One of the problems in the behavioral sciences generally is that we have a very limited technology. We really don't know very much about the mechanisms of emotional disorders. And I think one of the reasons for this is the fact that in the psychiatric interview situation, the person asking the questions of the patient, the psychologist or the psychiatrist, the interviewer, is often as much a variable as the patient himself. As a result, it's very difficult to know what in fact is influencing the information as it's being exchanged.
You mean the interviewer is interjecting his own personality into the interview and thereby changing the patient's reactions?
Yes, exactly. And what we've done here is to model the physician, model the psychiatrist up to the point of his inconsistencies. It's a very detailed history system, but it is consistent. And therefore, changes in patient responses over time or with other intervening phenomena are in fact a function of the patient and not the interviewer.
So once again, and in this instance, you are taking the human being as a model for the machine and then trying to push the machine beyond it.
One thing I'd like to stress, Dave, is that our research here, most of our research, is very much in the testing stages. What we're trying to do with such a project as the computer interviewing program is to demonstrate that in fact this is a good technique and will work. But as I say, I have hopes that computer-based history taking will be in a service operation in our hospital within the next year or two.
Well, what do you see in the farther future?
Well, we're working on a program whereby the computer will drive a number of interviewing stations. We plan to use the standard television set for this purpose, hopefully having one in every patient's room, and to use it both for medical history taking as well as patient education.
And will there come a day when there'll be a Linc in every doctor's office?
Well, I think this can go two ways, actually. I think there'll be small standalone computers, smaller and less expensive than the Linc, in the office of practicing physicians, doing both medical interviewing and serving other functions. And there'll also be terminals in the offices of physicians online with large central processing systems. In this way, I think that the general practitioner, for example, can be provided with expertise that is now usually available only to the specialist. I think that computer techniques such as these promise to make great changes in the role of the general practitioner. I think that computing may actually reverse the trend toward specialization.
Well, it seems to me that there's still two fairly big problems to Linc, having to do with vision and literacy. You have to be able to see the screen, and you've got to be able to read the questions. Now, what do you do with people who have trouble with their vision and illiterates?
Well, certainly, two real limitations of our system are that the patient has to be literate and he has to be able to see. But we're planning to use the spoken question as a means of overcoming this problem, program the computer to search FM tape for questions much in the manner that it now writes them on the screen. This would be of help, say, for the young child who could not read yet. And we have done work already on language and dialect, translating into other languages.
You've had a pretty good chance now to run quite a few patients through Linc. What's their reaction been in general? They like the machine?
Well, actually, you'd be amazed at how well patients react to the computer. When you mention the word computer, many people think of an austere, sort of awesome device up the ramp into the air-conditioned room, don't touch, things like that. But when you get a patient, such, say, as the elderly Wisconsin farmer from the north down, and put him down in front of the computer and the conversation begins, it's obvious to all who observe this phenomenon that the person is having fun. It's a fun experience. Patient reaction has been very good.
Did you have any qualms when you introduced the concept as to how physicians would take to it? This medical history is a pretty sacred area to the physician.
Well, certainly, we are modeling a function of the physician, and there was early concern expressed over a possible negative physician reaction. But we found this to be really ill-founded. Probably primarily because medical history taking is a very difficult procedure. It's very time-consuming and it's very expensive. And there are, I think, significant practical implications to this technique. General practitioners, for example, have been very enthusiastic about the possibility of automated history taking.
What about specialists?
Well, specialists have been very helpful to us, and they've generally reacted quite favorably. They feel, as we all do, that the computer is not yet certainly as good as the specialist in taking histories, and that much work has to be done in improving the quality and the detail of the history. We've had most extensive experience in allergy and gynecology, and we've been working on specialty histories in gastroenterology, respiratory diseases, neurology, psychiatry, pediatrics, and cardiology.
That's quite a mouthful even for Linc.
Yes, that'll keep us busy for a while.
Thank you very much, Warner. There's been a great deal of worry expressed by both physicians and lay people that the doctor is getting further and further away from the actual practice of medicine and turning into a cold, impersonal medical technologist. For a definitive opinion by a medical educator, we spoke with Professor Robert Schilling, chairman of the Department of Medicine of the University of Wisconsin. Dr. Schilling, won't Linc and other computer devices like it help increase the distance between the doctor and the patient?
No, computers need not increase the distance. They are time-saving devices, and they might improve the communication between the doctor and his patient by allowing the doctor to use his time discussing the pertinent aspects of the history revealed by the computer. There are many examples in medicine of where time-saving devices or paramedical personnel are now performing tasks once performed by doctors and nurses. And the time saved by such people for the doctor and the nurse has allowed the limited supply of professionals to go farther or to spend more time with each individual patient. So I look for the computer as a way of stretching the available medical talent.
And you don't feel that it will in any way injure the doctor-patient relationship?
No. If used properly, the time can be used to improve the doctor-patient relationship.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schilling.
Thank you, Mr. Prout.
The use of computers in medicine is far from new. Many hospitals already use them to speed the work of keeping business records, storing laboratory statistics, and monitoring routine hospital care. The question is, how far will they go? How far can they go? The medical computer people prophesy that the machine will take over many of the physician's functions, including diagnosis in certain areas of treatment, carrying out those programs automatically. Other medical men view the computer as a useful tool, but don't believe it will ever replace the doctor's intuition, human judgment, and personal contact. The answer, of course, is probably in the middle, utilizing the talents both have to offer to reach a common goal: the best possible care for the sick, and freeing the physician from routine so that he can better do his job. This is David Prowett, NET, at the University of Wisconsin in Madison.